Let's begin with a core truth. Learning isn't just about putting in hours. It's about aligning your biology with behavior. The human brain is not a passive sponge. It's an active energy, demanding organ wired to learn under very specific conditions. And when we understand those conditions, we gain the power to learn faster, retain longer, and perform at a higher level. The first habit, study in 90-minute cycles, your brain's natural rhythm. Your body and brain operate on what's called an ultradian rhythm. These are 90-minute cycles of heightened alertness followed by a natural dip in energy. During those 90 minutes, your brain is optimized for focus, pattern recognition, and memory encoding. After that, fatigue sets in, not because you're lazy or distracted, but because biologically, your system needs recovery. So instead of grinding endlessly, structure your studying in 90-minute focus blocks, followed by 10 to 30-minute breaks. That rhythm allows for deep concentration and then recovery, which primes you to go again. It's not about willpower, it's about rhythm. Second, move away from passive review. Use active recall and spaced repetition. If you're rereading notes or highlighting textbooks and expecting retention, you're wasting your effort. The brain learns by doing, not by watching. When you force yourself to retrieve information, even if you get it wrong, you're building stronger neural connections. That's active recall, testing yourself with flashcards, practice questions, even teaching the material aloud. Then, apply spaced repetition. Instead of reviewing material once or twice, you revisit it at increasing intervals over days or weeks. This process literally strengthens the synapses in your brain, turning fragile memory traces into durable, retrievable knowledge. Learning is not about cramming. It's about creating stress on memory circuits, controlled stress, that the brain adapts to. Third, understand the critical role of sleep and non-sleep deep rest. Sleep is the most underrated learning tool on the planet. When you sleep, especially during deep sleep and REM sleep, the brain takes what you studied and consolidates it into long-term storage. That means if you're pulling all-nighters, you're sabotaging your own memory formation. But there's more. During the day, short bouts of NSDR, non-sleep deep rest, can dramatically improve learning. Practices like yoga nidra or guided deep rest scripts lower brain wave frequency, reset your attention, and increase neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change. A 10 to 20-minute NSDR session between study blocks can increase learning speed, reduce fatigue, and elevate your cognitive endurance. Fourth, leverage dopamine by building in micro wins and novelty. Dopamine is not just the molecule of pleasure, it's the molecule of motivation. When you break your studying into small goals, like completing one concept, solving 5 problems, or mastering a definition, and then celebrate that win, you spike dopamine. That spike not only feels good, it makes your brain more likely to come back to the task tomorrow. And if you layer in novelty, a new study environment, switching colors in your notes, using a different voice to read aloud, you re-engage attentional systems and get another dose of that motivation chemical. Motivation is not luck, it's chemistry, and you can train it. And fifth, time your learning sessions for maximum neurochemical support. You don't have the same brain at 8 a.m. that you do at 8 p.m. Early in the day, especially the first 1 to 3 hours after waking, you have elevated levels of norepinephrine and acetylcholine. These neurochemicals sharpen focus and boost synaptic plasticity, making your brain more receptive to learning. Then, again in the late afternoon around 4 to 6 p.m., there's often a second natural rise in focus. Align your most demanding cognitive tasks, problem solving, memorization, concept learning, to these windows. Save passive tasks, like review or organizing, for other times. Timing isn't everything, but it can multiply your results when combined with effort. Let me be clear, your brain is not fixed. You can change it. You can wire it for better memory, for deeper focus, for faster understanding. But you must align your habits with biology. You must work with your brain, not against it. There is a massive difference between recognizing information and recalling it. Most people study in a way that feels productive, but is not. They highlight, reread, or underline. It gives the illusion of learning because the information looks familiar, but your brain isn't being tested. It's being lulled, recognition is shallow, recall is deep. If you want to transform the way you learn, you must flip the process. Instead of consuming content over and over, start extracting it from your memory, even when it's uncomfortable. That discomfort, it's a signal that your brain is reorganizing neural circuits to retain information. That's neuroplasticity in real time. Active recall is the most powerful learning tool we have because it mirrors the demands of real-world performance. You don't walk into an exam, an interview, or a live presentation with the material in front of you. You're asked to pull it from your brains, spontaneously. Practicing that process during study sessions teaches your brain exactly what to do when it counts. Let's get practical. How do you use active recall? You ask yourself questions before looking at the answers. You close the book and try to write down everything you remember. You create flashcards, not to review passively, but to test. You simulate explaining the concept to a beginner. Every time you force your brain to work, you're strengthening the synaptic pathways associated with that material. This is not about memorization alone. It's about strengthening access. When you do active recall repeatedly, you reduce retrieval time and improve precision. Over time, the information moves from short-term to long-term memory because the brain tags it as important due to repeated use. Now combine that with spaced repetition and you ignite another level of learning. Here's the principle. The brain forgets things in a predictable pattern. There's something called the forgetting curve. When you learn something new, your retention drops sharply after the first few days, unless you reinforce it. But if you revisit that information just before you're about to forget it, the memory becomes more stable. If you do this repeatedly over increasing intervals, let's say 1 day, 3 days, 7 days, 14 days, you're not just reinforcing the memory, you're rewiring the brain to store it more efficiently. This is the science behind spaced repetition, and it works because it aligns with how memory systems operate. The hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for forming memories, relies on repetition and emotional salience to decide what stays and what goes. When you return to a concept multiple times, especially after some forgetting has occurred, you send a strong message to your brain, this matters. As a result, the connections between neurons become more robust and enduring. When you combine active recall with spaced repetition, you create what could be called neural efficiency training. You don't just remember more, you do it faster with less effort and under pressure. This kind of training builds confidence because your brain starts to trust itself. It knows that when the time comes to perform, the information won't vanish. It will surface automatically with clarity. Importantly, this is a trainable skill. You're not born good or bad at memory. You train it. You condition your nervous system to respond to cues, to retrieve at speed, to encode with depth and the good news. It doesn't require more time. It requires smarter strategies. Studying longer isn't the answer. Studying better is. So ditch the highlighters and the passive review habits. They feel good but yield little. Instead, challenge your brain, engage retrieval, and schedule your reviews with precision. The harder it feels at first, the more you're growing. That strain is the signal that learning is actually happening. If there's one habit that can transform the results of your studying without adding a single extra hour of effort, it's this: optimize your sleep and rest cycles. The brain does not learn during study alone. It learns when it's allowed to consolidate information, And that doesn't happen while you're grinding through more chapters. It happens when you're not studying, especially while you sleep. Let's start with what the science shows. Sleep is where memory becomes long, lasting. During slow wave sleep, the deep, restorative stages of the night, the hippocampus and neocortex engage in a dialogue. The hippocampus is like a fast-access storage device where your brain places new information during the day. But it's not long-term, it's temporary. When you sleep, the brain begins to replay that information and move it into the neocortex, your brain's longer-term storage. This transfer process is what stabilizes memory, and it doesn't happen efficiently unless you get consistent, high-quality sleep. First few hours of sleep are rich in slow wave activity. That's where declarative memory, the kind used for facts, concepts, and things you consciously learn, is processed. Later in the night, REM sleep ramps up. That's where integration, problem solving, and creativity are enhanced. If you're skipping sleep or cutting it short, you're not only failing to store what you studied, you're weakening the circuits that control attention, focus, and emotion regulation the next day. Your performance declines, your ability to absorb new information drops, and your motivation takes a hit. It's not just about how many hours you sleep, it's about when. Sleeping in alignment with your circadian rhythm, meaning going to bed and waking up at roughly the same time each day, keeps your brain's internal clock synchronized. That synchronization affects everything from hormone release to alertness to cognitive function. A brain that sleeps irregularly is a brain constantly playing catch-up, which means it's never fully primed for optimal learning. But sleep isn't the only state that enhances learning. There's another powerful tool most people completely overlook: non-sleep deep rest, or NSDR. These are states of deep relaxation, where you're not asleep, but your brain is in a low frequency mode, similar to early stages of sleep. Think yoga nidra, body scans, or guided deep rest audio sessions. Even a well-structured 10-minute NSDR protocol can reset your nervous system and accelerate recovery. Why does this matter? Because deep rest between intense bouts of focus restores your brain's ability to learn. When you study, your brain builds temporary links. But during rest, true low-stimulation rest, it gets the chance to strengthen those links and clear out metabolic waste that builds up from mental effort. NSDR lowers cortisol, balances dopamine, and increases acetylcholine, chemicals critical for focus and plasticity. It's like hitting save on your mental progress midday. And here's what's truly extraordinary. NSDR not only helps you recover from cognitive fatigue, it also primes your brain to learn better in the next session. Research has shown that subjects who practiced NSDR in between learning blocks retained more information, were more alert during study, and had greater long-term memory performance than those who simply took passive breaks. So what does this look like in practice? After a 90-minute study block, lie down, close your eyes, and put on a 10 to 20-minute NSDR protocol. Let your brain shift into a quiet state. This isn't sleep, it's deliberate rest. No scrolling, no stimulation, no distractions. It's a reset, it's recovery, and it's strategic. Stack this habit alongside consistent nighttime sleep, and you unlock a dual system approach to memory. Consolidate at night, recharge during the day. You're no longer forcing your brain to push through fatigue. You're respecting its biology. You're working with its natural states to create a loop of learning, rest, and reinforcement that grows stronger over time. Motivation is not magic. It's not something you either have or don't have. It's a chemical state, one that can be trained, triggered, and sustained. That chemical is dopamine, and it plays a central role in learning, drive, and long-term academic success. If you understand how dopamine works, you gain the ability to shape your learning environment in a way that makes it not just bearable, but genuinely rewarding. Here's the truth most people don't realize. Dopamine is not just released when you achieve something. It's released in anticipation of achieving something. That means your brain is motivated not by rewards themselves, but by the process of pursuing them. When you set a clear, challenging, but achievable target, your brain starts releasing dopamine as you move toward it. The pursuit becomes energizing, focus sharpens, time disappears. That's what we call being in the zone. And dopamine is a big part of that state. This is where micro-wins become a powerful tool. Let's say you're studying for an exam with 10 chapters. If your only goal is finish everything, your brain gets no feedback until the end. That's a problem. It's too far away. Dopamine levels stay flat, and effort feels like a grind. But if you break that task into small, meaningful wins, like master the concept of osmosis, or complete 5 problem sets with no errors, you get a dopamine spike every time you succeed. Each one of those small victories gives your brain a chemical boost. That boost doesn't just feel good. It reinforces behavior, strengthens motivation, and makes you want to keep going. This is basic neurochemistry. When you complete a small goal and acknowledge it, even something as simple as checking it off a list, you get a dopamine pulse. That pulse strengthens the neural pathways associated with the effort that led to success. Over time, your brain starts linking effort with reward. It starts craving challenge. That's how motivation becomes a feedback loop, not a fleeting feeling. Now, add novelty to the equation, and you amplify this even further. Novelty is one of the most powerful natural triggers of dopamine. When your brain encounters something new, it becomes alert. It starts scanning for information. You pay closer attention. This is an evolutionary advantage. It helped us survive in changing environments. But today, it means that if you can introduce variation into your study routine, you can supercharge your motivation and engagement. This doesn't mean you need to rewrite your notes every day or move cities to study better. It can be simple. Change your study location. Switch the format. Go from writing notes to drawing diagrams. Use a different pen color. Read out loud. Watch a short video and then explain it to yourself. Small changes in input create novelty that re-engages your attention systems. You're giving the brain something it hasn't seen before, and that triggers curiosity, exploration, and most importantly, dopamine. There's also something called self-generated dopamine, and it matters more than most people realize. When dopamine is generated externally, say, by checking social media or watching something entertaining, it trains your brain to expect passive rewards. But when you generate dopamine internally, by setting a goal, focusing hard, and pushing through, it teaches your brain to associate effort with pleasure. That's what builds discipline. That's what builds long-term drive. And here's the nuance. You don't want to chase dopamine endlessly. You want to learn how to control when and where it's released. You want to be intentional. Dopamine is a finite resource in the short term. If you spike it constantly with distractions, you deplete your capacity to focus. But if you align it with small wins and meaningful goals, you build a sustainable rhythm. You're not riding waves, you're creating them. You can turn study sessions into sources of genuine satisfaction by engineering this feedback loop. Set small, specific targets, create novelty, acknowledge the win, then move to the next challenge. With repetition, your brain starts to light up not just when you win, but when you work toward winning. That's when studying becomes less of a task and more of a flow state. That's when learning sticks because the process itself becomes the reward. When you study matters just as much as how you study. Your brain's capacity to learn, focus, and retain information doesn't remain constant throughout the day. It rises and falls based on powerful biological rhythms governed by your circadian clock and the ebb and flow of key neurochemicals like norepinephrine, acetylcholine, and dopamine. Understanding and aligning your study schedule with these internal rhythms is one of the most underused yet high-impact habits in improving learning efficiency and cognitive performance. Let's break this down with clarity. Your brain is not a machine. It's a biological system tuned to cycles of alertness and fatigue. At certain points during the day, your neurochemistry is primed for intense focus and learning. At other times, it's biased toward rest, distraction, or even emotional processing. By learning to study in sync with your natural peaks, you create conditions where attention is easier, memory is stronger, and effort feels less draining. The first peak typically occurs 1 to 3 hours after waking. This window is driven by a surge in cortisol, a hormone that helps increase alertness, and elevated levels of norepinephrine, which boosts focus, vigilance, and mental energy. During this early window, acetylcholine also begins to rise, a neurochemical essential for encoding new information and enhancing plasticity in the brain. If you're learning complex material, solving difficult problems, understanding abstract concepts, or memorizing key information, this is your prime time. This means if you wake at 7 a.m., your optimal cognitive window might start around 8:30 or 9 a.m. and last until about 11 or 12. In this phase, the brain is in a high alert state, well positioned to engage in deep work. If you can anchor at least 190-min its study block during this period, you are working with your biology, not against it. Then comes the afternoon dip, often between 1 to 3 p.m. This period is marked by a natural decline in alertness and can be a difficult time to sustain deep focus. But this doesn't mean it's useless. Instead of trying to force productivity during this dip, use it for lighter cognitive tasks, like reviewing material you already know, organizing notes, or taking a non-sleep deep rest NSDR break to restore mental clarity. Recovery is part of the process, not a detour from it. Interestingly, many people experience a second cognitive peak in the late afternoon to early evening, typically between 4 to 6 p.m. During this time, dopamine levels tend to be more stable, and the mind is often better at synthesizing and applying information. You might find this window better suited to practice and application, such as doing mock exams, solving problems, teaching concepts to yourself out loud, or engaging in creative academic work. Think of the morning for input and the afternoon for integration. Sleep, caffeine, and even light exposure also affect these cognitive windows. Getting sunlight early in the day anchors your circadian rhythm and helps regulate the timing of neurochemical release. Sleeping at consistent hours ensures that your neurochemical reservoirs, particularly acetylcholine and dopamine, are replenished daily. Overuse of caffeine, especially late in the day, can interfere with your ability to access restorative sleep, which disrupts your next day's mental performance. Everything is connected. Also worth noting, your focus and learning potential are not just dictated by time of day, but also by your internal state. If you're sleep deprived, your peaks will be flatter. If you've had poor nutrition or little movement, your system will be less responsive to your optimal timing windows. This is why lifestyle inputs, sleep, exercise, hydration, and mental stress are not just side notes to learning. They determine how well your neurochemistry can do its job. This doesn't mean you have to become rigid or obsessed with exact timing. It means that by becoming aware of your peaks, by observing when your mind feels sharpest, most creative, or most focused, you begin to work with your biology. Over time, this reduces friction, enhances consistency, and dramatically increases the depth and retention of what you learn. Study at the right time with the right tools in the right state, and learning becomes not just easier. It becomes significantly more effective, neurologically optimized, and sustainable over the long term.